Welcome to NTD News. I'm Holly Kellum. Here are today's top stories. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo announces changes to the U.S. stance on Israeli settlements in the West Bank. He says the U.S. will no longer view them as illegal. This is a change from the Obama administration's policies. The U.S. and Montenegro are working together to protect against the threat of Russian and other cyber attacks. Security measures are being ramped up as a protective measure ahead of the 2020 U.S. presidential election and Montenegro's general election next year. Japan's lower house approved a trade deal with the U.S. that is expected to benefit U.S. farmers. The deal is now one step closer to a January 2020 rollout. And just this morning, intruders set fire to the Epoch Times Hong Kong printing press. Surveillance footage shows men carrying batons, pouring liquid over factory machines and newspapers, then igniting it. The White House has changed its position on Israeli settlements in the West Bank. It's a break from the previous administration's position.
The United States effectively backed Israel's right to build Jewish settlements on the West Bank with Pompeo's announcement.
After carefully studying all sides of the legal debate, this administration agrees with President Reagan. The establishment of Israeli civilian settlements in the West Bank is not, per se, inconsistent with international law.
Pompeo said U.S. statements about the settlements on the West Bank had been inconsistent, saying Democrat President Jimmy Carter in 1978 found they were not consistent with international law, and Republican President Ronald Reagan in 1981 said he did not view them as inherently illegal. Pompeo said the Obama administration and Secretary of State John Kerry again reversed the U.S.'s position in that administration's final days by adopting Carter's policy. The office of Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised the decision. In a statement released via Twitter, his administration said they view this as reflective of a historical truth and a righting of a historical wrong.
President Trump wrote on Twitter yesterday that he might be willing to testify in the impeachment inquiry, even though he says he did nothing wrong. On Monday morning, Trump wrote that he likes the idea of testifying and will strongly consider it. He cited his desire to get Congress focused again as his motivation. He named the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade deal, infrastructure, and lower drug pricing as some of the issues he would like Congress to focus on. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi offered to let Trump testify in person or in writing. However, the House Democrats leading the investigation have not yet called him as a witness. Public impeachment hearings are set to continue this week. Gordon Sondland, the U.S. ambassador to the European Union, is expected to be this week's star witness. He is scheduled to testify on Wednesday. Two Manhattan jail workers who were on duty the night Jeffrey Epstein killed himself were charged today. The high-powered financier had been charged with sex crimes. The workers were responsible for the monitoring of his high-security unit where Epstein was being held. Sources told the New York Times the guards failed to regularly check on him. Instead, they fell asleep for hours and forged records to cover up their neglect. The charges were the first in the investigation into his suicide. The two Federal Bureau of Prisons employees have been charged with falsifying records. Elite U.S. cyber experts are getting ready for potential Russian or other cyber attacks during the 2020 election. They are operating out of Montenegro, a strategic area in the Balkans where Russia has been seeking to restore its historic influence.
Following a Moscow attempt in 2016 and an attack on Montenegro by Russia-linked hackers, the U.S. military dispatched cyber experts to the Adriatic Sea state. The U.S. says Russian hacking group Fancy Bear is tied to the Russian military intelligence.
We have seen that the U.S. election also faced certain hybrid attacks. So I think both the United States and Montenegro have a mutual interest in cooperating on this.
The group is best known for allegedly penetrating the Democratic Committee ahead of the 2016 attack. Fancy Bear stole sensitive emails from then-candidate Hillary Clinton.
Because of cybersecurity cooperation, we've been able to develop patches against the latest Russian malware that now protect billions of devices worldwide. I'm proud to say that the next round of collaboration is currently underway, and I know it will yield positive results.
Moscow has been accused in meddling in election processes worldwide, including the U.S. and most recently Britain. Moscow denies doing so. Montenegro and its allies have expressed fears that Moscow could again try to meddle in the country's general elections next year. Meanwhile, the U.S. is also facing more cyber threats ahead of the 2020 presidential election from Russia as well as from Chinese state-sponsored hackers.
Congressman Peter King, who has been dubbed the Lion of Long Island, announced his retirement this month. Yesterday, he advised students not to follow in the division of today's politics. NTD's Miguel Moreno has more on that, plus King's legacy.
After 28 years in Congress, Republican lawmaker Peter King is hanging up his title to spend more time with his family. He told potential future lawmakers to learn how to compromise.
Practically, you're never going to get 100%. So decide what's your cutoff point. If you get 70%, is that enough? 65%?
When lawmakers don't compromise, King explained that the nation suffers. He used immigration as an example, which led to the last government shutdown.
Neither side wants to give in on that because Democrats don't want to put a penny in for a wall. Republicans don't want anyone who came in illegally to be allowed to stay, which is crazy. You're not going to deport 12 million people, and you do have to have better security at the border.
King has been a strong supporter in the fight against international terrorism and has hosted hearings on Islamic radicalization, hearing some Democrats criticized as stigmatizing the religion. Despite the criticism, he has stood in solidarity with Democrats on tighter gun control measures, policies Republicans are generally against. A few students felt that
his points were spot on in consideration to the visions that we have in our country nowadays, reaching across the aisle even on complex issues, for example.
It's always better to come to a common ground and find a solution that is beneficial to the people. So I was really appreciative of that.
Patricia Lorenzo is from Venezuela, and while she doesn't agree with the socialism some Democrats are proposing, she does think it's possible to work things out.
We should take the advantages of both parties and just mix them together to get a better understanding of what's happening and how to solve all the problems we have.
King's term ends in 2021. Democratic Senator Schumer of New York said on Twitter, Peter King stood head and shoulders above everyone else. I will miss him in Congress and value his friendship. Congressman King also gives credit to Democratic Senator Schumer for praising his character after he announced that he wouldn't run for re-election. Miguel Moreno, NTD News, New York.
Today, Japan's lower house approved a trade deal with the U.S. that was agreed to by President Trump in September. The deal cuts tariffs on farm and industrial products. This takes it a step closer to coming into force in January.
The Japanese parliament or assembly is called the Diet. It consists of the House of Representatives and councilors. Japan's lower house, known as the House of Representatives, has a balance of power. Agendas are put before the lower house first and must receive a majority vote to be passed on. 2 agendas regarding the U.S.-Japan trade deal were put to the vote on Tuesday.
Please stand up if you approve of these 2 agendas. In accordance with the report by the head of the Foreign Affairs Commission, the majority of the members are standing up. Therefore, these 2 agendas are approved.
When implemented, over 90% of U.S. food and agricultural products imported into Japan will either be duty-free or receive preferential tariff access. Producers of cheese, wine, beef, pork, wheat, and almonds are some of those set to benefit by the deal. This allows farmers the same access as Trans-Pacific Partnership competitors in New Zealand, Australia, and Canada. President Trump referred to the deal in September as a huge victory for America's farmers, ranchers, and growers. The U.S. will remove or reduce tariffs on some types of manufacturing equipment, as well as for other industrial products. These include parts for air conditioners and trains from Japan. One of the main sticking points for both sides still to be resolved is on auto tariffs. The government's proposal to ratify the trade deal will next be brought to the upper house for a vote, but its passage in the powerful lower house increases the chance it will come into force in January.
Iran shut down internet access since Saturday. Despite this, the U.S. says it has given internet access to Iranian citizens.
The internet shutdown followed demonstrations triggered by gas price hikes.
And we have been able to get into the hands of the Iranian people circumvention tools that allow them to communicate with each other when the regime tries to censor them.
Hook said he is working with private companies to allow citizens to publish videos of the protest online. Social media videos posted in defiance of the internet block showed protests taking place in several cities on Monday night, as well as a heavy presence of security forces in the streets. The UN Human Rights Office voiced deep concern at the Iranian security forces' use of live ammunition against demonstrators. The office's spokesman shared reports that the number killed was in the dozens.
They have shut down the internet in Iran. At the same time, the supreme leader, the president, and the foreign minister continue to use social media, and they use the internet to get out their message, but they don't let the Iranian people get out the truth.
Iran's supreme leader blamed the turmoil on foreign powers and denounced protesters as thugs.
4 Democratic congressmen wrote to Alphabet's Google and Ascension Health yesterday, demanding briefings by December 6th on how patient data the hospital chain is storing in the cloud is used. Google's parent computing unit said last week that it has incorporated industry standard security and privacy practices into its deal with Ascension, and that none of the data is being used for advertising purposes. But House Energy and Commerce Chairman Frank Pallone Jr., along with other members, said in their letter that questions remain about exactly what data is stored with Google. They want to know which Google employees have access to the data and to what extent the patients have been informed about the company's agreement. The U.S. and South Korea talks have hit a bump in the road over the cost of having U.S. troops stationed in and around Seoul. The U.S. said they cut the talks short. They say they'll be ready to start again when a mutually acceptable agreement is brought to the table.
U.S. Chief Negotiator James DeHart said the Korean negotiating team were unresponsive to what he called a fair and equitable burden-sharing proposal. DeHart had this to say on Tuesday about the future of defense cost talks.
We look forward to resuming our negotiations when the Korean side is ready to work on the basis of partnership and on the basis of mutual trust.
Following talks was the U.S. on Friday. South Korea's defense minister Jeong Kyung-do had agreed that the defense cost sharing should be fair and mutually agreeable. The point of contention, however, is on what figure both sides can agree on as being fair. According to South Korea's Minister of National Defense, there are around 28,500 U.S. troops stationed in South Korea. The purpose is to act as a deterrent against any threat from North Korea. President Trump previously described the value of this as being $5 billion worth of protection. This amount is a 5-fold increase on the previous Special Measures Agreement, or SMA, agreed upon in February 2019. SMAs have been in place since 1991 to determine South Korea's contribution to the cost of U.S. defense. Kyung-do said on Friday that the intention is to conclude negotiations for the 11th SMA before the 10th one expires in February 2020. Despite the collapse in talks, South Korea's chief negotiator confirmed on Tuesday that there has been no mention of the U.S. withdrawing troops from South Korea.
Police have released video showing the rescue of an 8-year-old Fort Worth, Texas girl who was kidnapped in broad daylight. The man who kidnapped the child, 51-year-old Michael Webb, was sentenced to life in federal prison last week. According to evidence presented at trial, Webb grabbed the little girl as she and her mother were walking down a neighborhood street. Webb admitted that he drove the child to a hotel room where he held her captive. A family friend spotted Webb's Ford sedan and called 911. The video shows the tense moments heavily armed officers found her and took Webb into custody.
We got her.
A Russian court today ruled that a former U.S. Marine, Paul Whelan, would stay in custody on spying charges.
The court rejected his appeal against the extension of his detention through late December.
We consider this decision unlawful and ungrounded, as we think that the pre-trial detention measures have become unviable.
Whelan, who holds U.S., British, Canadian, and Irish passports, was detained last December and accused of espionage. His lawyer says he's talked to ambassadors of all 4 countries. None of them, he says, have asked to organize his exchange yet. Moscow claims Whelan was caught red-handed. He denies the allegations and says he was set up in a politically motivated sting.
Up next, hundreds of protesters fled from Hong Kong Polytechnic University or surrendered themselves to police overnight. The chaos followed intense violence at the campus, which has been at the center of a standoff in the past week.
This is extremely gutsy. The Chinese Communist Party is not known for taking criticism very well.
The police have walked off the streets and been firing tear gas and beanbag rounds at the protesters, and they've made several arrests.
警方呢是一直进行了一些推进，并且呢是多次舉起黑旗和橙旗呢去發射很多的催淚彈。
即係佢哋放催淚彈嗰時，嘭咁撞到個肚㗎。咁咧就我而家翻轉頭咧見到個咁嘅嘢，因為嗰時兵荒馬亂啦，我就。
That's the media liaison. They're telling us that we need to get out of here. They're telling the press to leave.
一带呢都有市民在这里聚集。
Boy, this tear gas is getting pretty strong.
Hundreds of protesters have left the besieged Polytechnic University in Hong Kong, most handing themselves in to police, but some of them leaving through daring escapes. Meanwhile, Hong Kong police are accused of driving vehicles into protesters during clearance operations.
Hundreds have left the flaming battleground of Hong Kong's Polytechnic University, though scores of defiant protesters remain inside. Some left through daring escape attempts, around a dozen shimmying down plastic hosing from a bridge before fleeing on waiting motorbikes as police fired projectiles. But most who have left the campus handed themselves in, driven to desperation after police surrounded the institution, subjecting it to 2 days of siege. Police said around 400 adults and 200 under the age of 18 surrendered overnight. On the campus grounds, many fear lengthy sentences if they are charged with rioting, as police have threatened.
I know that the policemen just want to solve this event, and then for us, we want just to leave safely.
Hong Kong's leader Carrie Lam says there are at least 100 people still on the campus. Lam warned that police are ready to take necessary action if there are major life-threatening incidents. Outside the campus, the parents of those protesters still inside want to avoid a tragedy.
As parents, we only have one wish. That is, we hope that each and every one of them can safely return home with us.
We do not want any of these parents present to become Tiananmen mothers, or for history to call them the Polytechnic University mothers.
On Monday, tens of thousands of people tried to encircle police officers near the campus in order to distract them and rescue those trapped inside. Video footage shows riot police firing tear gas towards protesters. Police vans trailing them rushed through street fires at high speed. When asked about police vehicles speeding into the crowd, one of the officers said it was necessary to take such measures.
Drive fast doesn't mean it is unsafe. For our police officers, they all well trained.
Another video shows a group of officers from the Special Tactical Squad, commonly known as Raptors, chasing and beating non-resisting protesters in the streets. Some even dragging protesters out and kicking their heads.
A printing press for an independent newspaper in Hong Kong was attacked today. The newspaper, NTD's sister media, Epoch Times, was founded to bring uncensored media to mainland China. NTD's Paul Greany is in Hong Kong with that story.
At around 3:40 a.m. local time, 4 masked men forced their way into the independent printing press that produces the Epoch Times newspaper in Hong Kong. 2 of the men carried batons and another carried 2 containers containing a flammable liquid, which he poured onto the factory machines and newspapers. One man then ignited the liquid with a lighter. The 4 men ran away after the fire started, and the whole incident lasted about 2 minutes. Although the masked men were dressed in all black, similar to Hong Kong protesters, neither the owner of the print shop nor the Epoch Times newspaper believe that the protesters are behind the attack.
I don't think they're protesters, because there's no reason for them to do so. What they were trying to fight for, they want the world to know, they want people to know.
Protests have rocked the region over Beijing's growing influence in Hong Kong's affairs.
So we are one of the newspaper who really gives out the truth and really reporting the real situation here.
The Epoch Times is an independent newspaper and has been banned in China since being founded in 2000. The Hong Kong branch has been targeted by the Chinese Communist Party before.
For example, our computer technician who was kidnapped by them in Zhuhai for 2 days, and then they sent him back to be a special agent for them. And his mission was supposed to be sabotage the Hong Kong Epoch Times.
Last week, celebrity and democracy activist Denise Ho tweeted out a photo showing that only the Epoch Times and one other major paper did not run a front-page political ad condemning Hong Kong's pro-democracy protesters.
Up next, Taiwan's president says Communist China is interfering with Taiwan's elections. She says the regime is using various means to influence the outcome. Find out why she thinks the mainland keeps intervening. That and more after the break.
What's special for us?
Bring your family, let your children experience this.
I know my daughter just loves it. When the curtain first opened, I looked out at her face and she was amazed by what she saw.
It's great for the whole family.
And I have a granddaughter. I want her to see something like this because it'll probably enrich her soul and her development as a person. It would change her life.
It's hard for kids to listen to parents all the time, but when they hear it from an outside influence as well, reinforcing your values, that's great.
Oh, it's so beautiful. And her birthday was Friday, so we surprised her with tickets.
I was just so amazed. They're amazing, amazing dancers.
The girls are so elegant and beautiful, and the colors are amazing.
It's just amazing. It's truly breathtaking. Just the story. There's a story behind everything as well, which is amazing. There's so much culture.
It's a bridge between meditation and peace and where we are now in our busy lives.
As an adult and a teacher, it's awesome to see kids reacting and having that positive reaction to the show.
I will see it next year and year after that and the year after that. It is just incredible, absolutely beautiful.
I wish I could see it again, like right now.
Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen said China is intervening in Taiwan's elections every day and that it's trying to damage the island's democracy.
The election campaign, which is also for Taiwan's legislature, has now kicked into high gear. It's being closely watched by Taiwan's neighbor, China. China sailed an aircraft carrier group through the sensitive Taiwan Strait on Sunday. Sunday was also the day Tsai announced her running mate, former Premier William Lai. Lai's pro-independent comments have angered Beijing. China claims Taiwan as its territory and wants it brought under Beijing's control by force if necessary. China intervening in our elections is not something that happens on 1 or 2 days. That's very clear. This is more or less the consensus of Taiwan's people. China is using various means to intervene in Taiwan's election to damage our democracy. Tsai noted the timing of the vote. China's pressure campaign is amping up against the backdrop of anti-government protests in the Chinese city of Hong Kong.
Authorities said today that a gas explosion at a coal mine in China has killed 15 miners. Another 9 miners were injured.
The blast occurred at a mine in the Shanxi province in northern China on Monday. Rescue work was halted early Tuesday morning after everyone was accounted for. The Shanxi Provincial Work Safety Administration said 11 miners escaped without injury. The cause of the explosion is being investigated. While relatively small in scale, the mine had been cited last year for failing to provide adequate training for workers. Coal occurs in beds called seams. Gas explosion in mines usually occur when volatile methane, also known as coal gas, is not properly ventilated after leaking from the seam. At a high concentration, the coal gas can be ignited by a simple spark, open flame, or electrical equipment.
Up next, 100 French chefs gather in Paris for a festival that draws 25,000 participants to learn about healthy eating. The event attracts tourists and local food lovers alike. Chefs share their timeless wisdom. More on their advice after the break.
This season, take an incredible journey through 5,000 years of culture with Shen Yun. Discover why people are calling Shen Yun a visual feast, a pleasure to the ear, an epic tale, a must-see. Shen Yun, an all-new production every year.
"100 French chefs gathered in Paris this week for a show dedicated to understanding how to eat well. Our French correspondent, David Vives, has more on their advice.
Bien manger is French for eating well. It is also the name of a show that's drawn around 25,000 visitors to the Grand Palais in Paris this weekend. Parisians, tourists, and food lovers were invited to meet with 100 chefs and exhibitors, cooking and unveiling their recipes.
There's a motto in France: eating well is the start to a healthy life. If you want to put it in practice, here are some advices from French chefs.
Hear my words: 5 different vegetables or fruits every day.
What is important is the product. It is the heart of what you cook. Without a good product, you can't cook anything good. On the weekend, I always cook for my wife, and I use cereals such as quinoa and chickpeas. The health rewards will last throughout the coming week.
According to former chef Gerard Cagna, we should always eat in response to seasonal products, eat locally, as well as pay attention to our philosophy of eating.
The ancient Greek philosopher Epicure said, "Eat well and you'll live well for a long time." He didn't say, "Be a greedy pig." It seems to me that more people in our day and age care to eat less and better. This seems like a good spirit to me.
The show also features a selection of 300 fresh products from around the world. The brains behind the show, Thierry Marx, is also a fan of the U.S., where his family lives. He says he's inspired by the culture.
Street food is a marvelous thing. French chefs must get interested in it. We should think of people who can't afford to spend a lot of money to eat. Street food also allows you to get in touch with other cultures and their roots.
And what will Marx cook for his family this Christmas?
An 80% vegetable-based meal and a beautiful turkey to go with it.
Good advice to marry health and pleasure on your plate.
And that's all for now. Thanks for tuning in. Join us again tonight. I'm Holly Kellum.